This is the Maida Initiative, conversation without compromise.
And then a bad leader, it's all the leaders I've talked to are not really bad leaders, but I would say just based off of, I guess, what's in the media, um, I would say that a bad leader is somebody who is not willing to accept their own mistakes. And I guess the number one thing is honesty. I think there was a have you read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't read all of it.
By Stephen Covey. Yeah, it's a, I think we talked about it when we were having lunch. But anyway, that book, it says the number one, there's like a study that was done, and the number one characteristic that is like a deal breaker for all leaders, like for people to believe in a leader or to like want somebody as their leader, the number one deal breaker is honesty. So somebody's not honest, they could be humble, they could be competent, they could be like, no matter, they could be like great in every aspect, but if they're not honest, people will not want them as their leader. Like, it's just, honesty is key. Like you cannot be a liar and a leader at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it also ties into humility as well, because if you think about it, right, the reason people lie is usually a pride thing. They don't want to look bad.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep, I can see that.
So they're kind of inflating that.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I think it's really important to think through where you start with that as well, because if you're not doing that well in the home, it's very difficult to export that. It starts with family, it starts with the people closest to you, and then sort of flows out of there, rather than you can't, I don't think it's possible to live in a dichotomy between personal and professional for very long. I think it all breaks down.
Yeah, you can't have like 3 different personas. I think, I don't know, you gotta have always, sooner or later people are gonna figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that kind of quitting a successful job and starting a kind of entrepreneurial venture is not super common in the Arab community.
I agree. Yes.
So why do you think that is?
Because when you look at the roots of the Arab culture, it is it's very collectivist, which it's very family oriented, right? It's very much so like the goal of your existence, in the Arab world, is to have kids and multiply and be a part of a big family. Like, that is the goal, right? And I think that's also the case with cultures like, North African cultures, Asian cultures as well, some Asian cultures, right? And when you do something like risky like that, you are risking the supply of income that will feed into you starting it's going to delay the starting of getting married, starting of a family, being part of a bigger family, right? It's going to delay that. And so the more risks you take, and 90% of startups will fail. So if you're 33, 34, and maybe you haven't saved up a lot of money to buy a house and start a family or whatever it is, right? Then just I guess the risk of that is a greater motivator than the potential of success of a venture or whatever. So I think that's what's key, is that the Arab culture is so collectivist and is so family oriented that the best, the advice is get a great job so you can start a family, and anything else is considered risky or not good.
What do you think Arab culture is missing out on as a result of discouraging entrepreneurship and being, I guess, timid of any kind of ventures like that?
I mean, I wouldn't say that they're missing out on anything, because I'm life is, to me, is subjective, right? There's no right or wrong. I feel like life isn't binary, and that is right for a lot of people. Like, it's for a lot of people, going out and taking risks is not a good thing. It's better to just have a good job and start a family, right? So, I mean, I don't necessarily think that they're missing out on anything, unless they feel unhappy or they feel like that's not what's right for them. Then they're missing out on it. And if they are missing out on it, they should take some time to think about what really does give them energy and what is their passion and what they do really want. So it depends on, it's a case by case basis, I would say.
Okay, so let's take those. Let's forget about the cases where doctor, lawyer, success, right? They're happy what they're doing, their family's doing well. But speak to the guy or woman who's listening from an Arab background, or just sort of a Muslim background in general, who comes from a culture that's like this, who kind of has something in their sort of bones that, I wish I could do this, but there's so many obstacles. What would you say to that person? What advice would you give them?
Man, that's a very good question. And this is in the context of they want to be like start their own business, right? Like entrepreneur.
Yeah, something like that, or quit med school, become an artist. I've had somebody on the show who you probably know Hiba.
Oh, Hiba, what's her last name?
Jamil.
Oh man, I'm not familiar.
She's
I feel embarrassed.
Yeah, she's a Iraqi woman living in Seattle who was on a kind of medical track, and then for several reasons just couldn't feel like she could do that anymore, and has successfully become a full-time artist.
Wow, that's great. That's great. I would say that if you feel like you found like you feel like you know what you want to do, and the reason you're not doing it is because of your parents or because of you feel like you're indebted to your culture or whatever, and you live in America, I would say that the advice is to it takes a lot of time. The CEO for the company I used to work for, I used to sit down with him a lot, and we had lunch, and we spent a lot of time together. And the one takeaway that I took from him was, the longer you take to make a decision, the better the decision eventually is. So that's not to say take 10 years to make a decision, but don't make reactive decisions. The longer you take, the better. So really think through your decision. Take a lot of time to think about your decision. And I'd say reading and writing is very important. Reading and writing is very important. So if you're interested in being an artist, read some biographies of artists that have lived, the greatest artists that have lived before, and just start kind of writing out your thoughts on like what you really want, like just in a journal or typing or whatever, right? Because through that process, you'll really figure out what it is that you like. You're just kind of like taking what's in your brain and like, it's like diarrhea for the brain, right? And I think through that process and over time, you will realize that, hey, you know what, this, like, if I continue on this track, and I really want to go on this track, then, when I'm 40 or 50, I'm really going to regret it. And I'm also going to resent my parents for it. Like, there's a bit of resentment there too. So time, reading and writing, and just prayer, meditation, right? So, I mean, in Islam, we have what we pray 5 times a day.